I want to thank everybody for having me. And I always love doing work with FPAN. Actually, I've been involved doing work with FPAN for quite some time, at least I would say 10 years or so. And we used to go to a lot of the lectures up here in the north, the east, central. Anyway, so my name is Erik Denson. I am a lead instructor and board member for Diving with a Purpose archaeology program. I've actually been involved with the program since its inception, DWP1. I was one of the first participants of three in that initial program. I'm also a board member of the on the History of Diving Museum, Patty Dive Master, and an AUS scientific diver. Do a lot of work with NOAA and the National Park Service. So I am not an archaeologist. I'm going to tell you that straight up. My actual day job, I am the electrical chief engineer for NASA at the Kennedy Space Center. And I've been there 33 years. I have a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Howard University in Washington, D.C., a Master's in Electrical Engineering from New York Polytechnic University, which is part of NYU now. And as I mentioned, I am a dive master and a scientific diver. And I've been certified since 1992. I'm also the co-founder and president of Diverse Orlando Scuba Club, which is actually an affiliate club of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers. And I'm actually in the Hall of Fame for the National Association of Black Scuba Divers. And very proud to say that I worked on the Artemis project. And that's our program that's going to take us to the moon and Mars. And so I actually worked in the Launch Control Center for that launch. And I ran outside right when it was taking off. You can see me holding up my fist there, pumping up Artemis. So that was very exciting. So, and that's what I do in the day job. So, diving with a purpose. Our motto is restoring our oceans and preserving our heritage. And our mission is, we are a community-focused nonprofit organization dedicated to conservation and protection of submerged heritage resources. And we provide education, training, certification, and field experience. And I'll talk a lot about that in some of the projects that we have to adults. And we have a youth program. And we are known for special concentration into slave trade shipwrecks and the maritime history and culture of African Americans. How did we get started? Actually, the program we started conceptually, well, back in 2003, we were asked to participate in a documentary called the Guerrero Project. And the documentary is about the search for the slave ship Guerrero, as told through a book by Gail Swanson called The Slave Ship Guerrero. And the documentary told the story of treasure hunters and archaeologists and their opposing views and location of the lost ship. And as you guys know, being archaeologists, there is always kind of a contention there between hunters and salvagers and archaeologists. So it was very interesting cast of characters when I participated in that documentary. And so the late Brenda Lesendorf, she was the only archaeologist at Biscayne National Park at the time. And she needed help to document shipwrecks in Biscayne National Park. And so her and Kenneth Stewart, who is our program director for Diving with a Purpose, talked and got together and formed Diving with a Purpose. And basically the goal of that was to twofold, to help Brenda document shipwrecks in Biscayne National Park, but also allow us to teach initially members of National Association of Black Scuba Divers, archaeology techniques. So we could actually go and look for that Guerrero. And when we did look for it, we would actually know what we were doing from an archaeology perspective. So it was a twofold. And one of her goals was that to make sure that not only did she teach us, she wanted us to teach others. So the initial program, she taught us the techniques, and then she kind of stood back and said, "Now it's your turn. You need to teach." And so that's how the program developed. And we have a cadre of um, instructors in our program, and we use that model to conduct our field school. Along the way, we've had a lot of good accomplishments. Since 2005, over 500 people have participated in the program. And it doesn't seem like a whole lot over that time frame, but you got to realize too, we only do this program a couple of times a year. And we're only talking about 20 something people per session. We are always booked up. So we have done a lot over the past years, and we're very proud of too the amount of youth that have gotten involved in the program too. We've trained actually the number is a little lower, over I think over 90 youth now. And over that time, we've documented over 20 shipwrecks, including 18th and 19th century sailing vessels, World War II aircraft. And again, what I'm really proud of is the amount of hours that we have, volunteer hours, to Biscayne National Park and the National Marine Sanctuaries, over 18,000 hours. We have gotten recognized for some of our work here. We received a Take Pride in America award, and that was given by the Department of Interior. And we actually had an opportunity to go to the White House and get a tour there. You can see a picture of us. That was some time ago, but that was a very unique program and an award. So we are featured in a couple of different documentaries, one including The Changing Seas. And we actually have a little piece in the African American History and Culture Museum. We're proud too that our director, Mr. Ken Stewart, was Scuba Diving Magazine's Sea Hero of the Year in 2018. I don't know, some of you might have seen the Enslaved documentary. We had some of our people who are actually involved in that as well. And that was a very riveting series. Hopefully, if you haven't had a chance, please see that. And one of our own, Tara Roberts, she's a Nat Geo explorer and storyteller. And she was on the cover of National Geographic in March of 22. And actually, we had it was a multi-page, maybe 10 to 15 pages on diving with a purpose and our program. And so that was outstanding. And from my understanding, I think Tara is the first African American woman to be on the cover of National Geographic. So one of our big things is, I mentioned, we have our archaeology program is our field school, and that is actually coming up this first week in June. And so basically it's an intense 1 week field school program. We teach the basics of maritime archaeology, ship construction, artifact identification, mapping techniques, and we talk a little bit about the history and culture research. And our program is a PADI certified course. I have something. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. But one of the things I always like to mention too, when I talk about our program and to our students as well, is talk about the significance. It's not just documenting a shipwreck. And as you know, as archaeologists, these shipwrecks, and they tell a story, and tell a story of time, culture, and people. And that's what's really important. It's not about the ship itself. So when we look at these artifacts that we're documenting, we have to understand, what kind of story they're telling us. And one of the things I like to point out too, when I talk to the students, and you guys know, when you look at an anchor, the anchor can tell you maybe the era of that ship that we're documenting and the age, just because the anchors and types of things change. Same thing with like China and earthenware in that case. And one of the other things too is you can see here at the bottom of the screen there, they look like bracelets, and those are manillas. And they were used during the slave trade to actually buy and sell a human being. And so you really have to understand some of these artifacts that, we can dealing with, because they tell a story itself too. And when I was just going back there behind me, I actually have a manila right here. And this was actually found on the shipwreck, not one we were documenting. And I actually got this from a little store, seaside store over in the Tampa area. And it said brass manila, and it said what wreck it came from. But the people in the store had no idea what this was. And so I talked to them about this, and I got on my soapbox and I said, "Did you know this was actually used to buy and sell a human being?" And you know how much this cost in the store? It was like $11. And so of course, I brought it, but I wanted to have it so I can share the stories behind different things like that and the meanings of the artifacts. So I definitely got on my soapbox about that. One of the projects that we've been working on, I'm talking a little bit about some of the projects. One of the projects that got us started was the search for the Guerrero. And again, that was a Spanish pirate ship that sunk off the coast of Key Largo um, back in 1827. So we participated in a couple of different missions to actually locate that particular shipwreck. Um, the story of the Guerrero was very, very interesting. And I mentioned the documentary and also the book. If you're interested in it, I really suggest that you read it. It is kind of, the story is very riveting. But it sunk back in 1827 and was being pursued by the Navy vessel, the Nimble. And at the time, although it was 1827, slavery, the transport of slaves was illegal. And although slavery still was legal as far as having slaves in the the new country. But anyway, the ship was carrying 561 Africans en route to Cuba, and unfortunately, 41 of them died during that incident there. And so we partnered with NOAA and at the time the Mel Fisher Maritime Heritage Society, and we did a search for the Guerrero. We did two expeditions in 2010 and 2012. We brought up pieces of ceramic, glass, iron shot, wood samples, and stuff, and they were removed from the sites. And actually have a 3D printed model of one of the cannonballs that we found there too. And so a lot of that was examined, and it does point towards that site being the Guerrero, but didn't have any smoking gun, no bell that said Hannah. I mean, no bell that said Guerrero. We've done other survey sites in that area in 2017, and actually we're going to do another one this year in 2023 to kind of put a bow around it and say, hey, we think that is the initial site. So we're investigating other potential sites to either confirm or just knock them off the list so we can narrow this down. So, but a lot of the empirical evidence points to the site being the site of the Guerrero. We've done a lot of work with NOAA. Our program for the adult program has been over the last 10 years in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, and we've documented quite a few wrecks there. Although I mentioned that we have a field school there, but it's not like this is a real field school, and we're actually documenting wrecks that we're not sure what they are. And by conducting that work with the field school, it helps the principal investigators to actually maybe identify some of these shipwrecks. And one of the success stories was the Hannah M. Bell. We worked with NOAA on 3 different years to document the Hannah M. Bell. And it was locally known as Mike's Wreck. And the reason why it was called Mike's Wreck is because this guy named Mike, who was a boat captain, found it, and he decided to name it after himself. So this was what I mentioned, the Guerrero. So we were able to bring up pieces. We found cannons and cannonballs and that type of thing. I'm so sorry. I'm glad you mentioned. I didn't want to have to do the whole thing over again. So I mentioned about the Hannah Bell. So that was a success story there, and we were able to document that wreck. And let me see what else we Documented another sailing, I mean, a steamship called the Acorn. And these were both ships from the mid 1800s. We've recently documented this another wreck called the Orva. And last year we documented what we call the Brick Wreck. And that's still unidentified. And we're still trying to find out what that guy is. And this year we're going to be on Horseshoe Reef in Key Largo area, and the wreck there is called Horseshoe Reef Wreck, and we don't know what that is. So hopefully, through our documentation, will be able to help identify that wreck. One of the other projects we worked on was the African Slave Wrecks Project, and some of our members participated with that. And the Slave Wrecks Project is a partnership with the African American Museum of Culture, Smithsonian, as well as George Washington University, and documented the San Jose in South Africa, which was a slave shipwreck. And actually, shackles were recovered in that shipwreck. You can see right here, and these are ballast. And I didn't participate in this particular project. Kamal Siddiqui, who was one of our board members and lead instructors, did, and I believe that's him. And he always talked about that water. The water was very cold. I think it was in the 40s. I told him you can keep that particular one. I'm a Florida diver. And some of the work resulted from that work in the San Jose is actually in the display of the African American Museum of History and Culture in Washington, in DC, the Smithsonian. We actually have an exhibit with our work there. And that's actually one of the boards there in the Diving with a Purpose. And so it's part of a permanent exhibit there. So if you haven't had a chance to go to that Smithsonian Museum, it is amazing. It really takes more than a full day to go through it. It is really amazing and tells a great story. So highly suggest that. All the Smithsonian museums are fantastic. And one of the projects really dear to my heart was participating in documentation of a Tuskegee Airmen aircraft wreck in Lake Huron. And I don't know if how many people are familiar with the Tuskegee Airmen, but they were the first African American fighter pilots in World War II. And all of them pretty much got trained in Tuskegee, Alabama, hence the name Tuskegee Airmen, in the Tuskegee Institute. But a lot of them got additional advanced training up in Michigan and in that area. And the reason why they went up there was the climate and the terrain mimicked the European theater. So they allowed them to do more advanced training there before they went over to Europe. And so in an initial mission in 2015, we were asked by the state archaeologist of Michigan, Wayne Lusardi, to help document the artifacts from that particular wreck. And the pilot was Lieutenant Frank Moody, and that's a picture of him there. And really interesting, the wreck was found in 2014 by some local divers there. And they actually thought it was a car that they found, because they found this door down at the bottom, kind of looked like a Volkswagen door, but it's actually the cockpit door. And they notified Wayne Lusardi, who is the chief archaeologist for this program. And so the subsequent year, 2015, we went down there. But going back to, I mentioned in 2014, that his wreck, and I always get choked up when I talk about this, was found 70 years to the exact date in April of the accident. Exact date, 70 years later. And so it was almost like his story, it was time for his story to be told. And one of the main ways that we were actually able to confirm the aircraft, they found the instrument panel here. I don't have a zoomed in picture here, but the instrument panel has a unique identifier. It's a radio call number. And we were able to find that radio call number, and Wayne did the research and said, hey, we found it. That's Lieutenant Frank Moody's aircraft. Participating in this mission was really amazing. Up at the top here, this is actually the wing section of the aircraft. And if you look closely here, you can see the Army Air Corps star insignia on the wing. It almost really brought tears to my eyes. I took that picture of Wayne there, and because it's really sobering, because these pilots, gave their lives for a country at the time when the country really didn't believe in them. The Tuskegee Airmen were, this was almost an experiment to show that African Americans could not be pilots. And they showed them wrong. They became some of the best pilots in the world. And back in 2021, I assisted Wayne and also the National Museum of Tuskegee Airmen, and we brought up some of the artifacts here. It's shown in this picture is actually 50 caliber machine guns, and they were doing practice runs, and so there was lots of bullets, armament down there. To give you an idea of a 50 caliber, you can see here in the picture, it's pretty big, and there was hundreds of them on the floor. We found the engine section, the tail section, quite a bit of artifacts there, and subsequently they found out what happened is I don't know if you're familiar with some of the aircraft there, but this had a nose gun, the P-39, and it worked on some kind of mechanism that it was actually shoot through the propeller. It would time to shoot in between the propeller, I meant to say. That malfunctioned, and they found one of the propellers with bullet holes in it. So he actually shot through his own prop, and that's what caused the accident. So it was a mechanical failure on the aircraft that caused the accident. And he did perish in the accident. So this was really, again, this had a profound impact on a lot of our members here. So I wanted to do a little bit more. So I initiated an idea to put up a Tuskegee Air Memorial in Port Huron. And so we partnered with the city of Port Huron, and we raised money, and we dedicated a memorial 2 years ago, 2021, right there in Port Huron over by the water. And it's a beautiful area, and that's the monument there. And we were blessed to actually have two Tuskegee Airmen, original Tuskegee Airmen. One of them who actually flew with Lieutenant Frank Moody, and they're there at the bottom, Lieutenant Al Jefferson and Harry Stewart. We were blessed to have both of them. And actually, Lieutenant Moody's nephew, he's standing right there at the bottom there. We were able to get in contact with him, and he attended the ceremony too as well. So very proud of this effort that we did as far as DWP raising money for the memorial. We've also been involved, and some of you might have heard about the last slave ship, the Clotilda. We've had some of our people partner with Search Incorporated to help document that, as well as the National Park Service to document that slave ship. And again, this has another amazing story. And there's a documentary that Kamau is actually one of the stars in. It's called Descendant, and it's a Netflix documentary. And it talks about the people and the descendants of those Africans who were enslaved and who were on that last slave ship. As I mentioned too, we have a Youth Diving with a Purpose program. It is the same week-long type of program, very rigorous, but we also provide mentoring to these young kids who work in the program too as well, all year round. So it's a kind of an all-year program, but we do have the field schools, and that's in July too as well. We've done work in Costa Rica and actually Mozambique, so we've done some international field schools. We used to do a coral restoration program too as well. A lot of you probably heard about that. But we've also started a new program called CARES, DWP CARES. And it's called a collective approach to restoring our ecosystem. And it basically what we do is an assessment various coral reefs, the coral, the fish counts, and different things like that. And it's uploaded to a national database. So it's really tracking our ecosystem and the changes and effects on it over the course of time. Back in 2019, we enjoyed 15 years of DWP, and we actually had an exhibit down there at the History of Diving Museum. And you can see there at the top, we had a special guest. He was actually down there, part of the Enslaved documentary. That's Samuel L. Jackson. He actually got on a boat with us, and he is actually a certified diver, but he said, I will never do that again. So, but he was a character. It was really great to meet him. And as a plug here too, if you haven't been down to the History Diving Museum, it is fantastic. And I'm a board member, but I've been a fan of that even way before I became a board member. And it really grows through the history of diving and all the different equipment that people have used. And you'd be surprised some of the things people use for helmets and other things. They really had some guts back then. But it is an amazing museum. And that's in Isla Mirada, Florida. So if you ever get a chance, please go down there too. And check them out on the website because they have online what they call immerse yourself. They have different presentations like we're doing here, some great presentations. They do that monthly, so you can sign up to get on the newsletter, and those presentations are free to the public, both in person as well as virtual. And so the exhibits, they have permanent exhibits, but they also have other exhibits that change maybe 2 or 3 times a year. And actually the next one I think will change this month, and it's called Aquanauts to Astronauts, and kind of up my alley too. But it shows the the combination of aquanauts, those who spend a long time on the water, and astronauts, and the synergy between the two efforts there too. So really, really cool. And just mentioning where our upcoming programs, we have June 4th to 11th is our archaeology program. 11th to the 18th is the CARES. We're doing that Search for the Girl in July. And then our youth program is also in July. And we're doing a international cultural awareness program in Honduras with the kids, and that's in October. So I think I'm wrapping that up, and I would be glad to take any questions. And actually, before I go back, I'll just point out, because I had it out of order, but this is one of our products. So this was the photogrammetry I just mentioned, the rec we did last year. And going back, I'm sorry you missed this. This is one of the site maps. This was a site map of the Hannah and Bell. And again, that was work that was done over the course of about 3 years. And so we have maps like this that we do every year for each particular field school and rec site we map. So I mentioned that we're doing the old school drawing ways, and we're starting to get into the photogrammetry too as well. So that's one of the new skills that we're trying to learn. I think that's it now, and I'll be glad to take any questions